Hello everyone, it's Bible story time. Today we are reading a story from 2 Samuel 7 and 1 Chronicles 17 called God's Promise to David. Let's listen. One day, David called the prophet Nathan to him. "It does not seem right that I am living in such a splendid palace, while God's covenant chest is in a makeshift tent. I want to build a fine temple for it." That night, God spoke to Nathan. In the morning, the prophet told the king, "God has always traveled with his people in a tent, to be with them wherever they went. He does not want you to build him a temple." David was bitterly disappointed, but Nathan continued, "God does not want you to build him a house, for it is he who will build a house for you. It is because of him that you left your sheep and fields to become king of all Israel. He promises that he will be with you and help you overcome your enemies. With his guidance, you will become the greatest king upon earth, and your sons will be kings of Israel after you forevermore." David was filled with gratitude. When Nathan had gone, David gave his thanks to God in a heartfelt prayer. He had wanted to do something for God, but God had done something wonderful for him, a simple shepherd boy instead. One of the people in today's story was David. We have read stories about David before. Do you remember anything about him? Well, we read a couple stories from when David was a kid. If you remember, we have read about the time David was chosen by God to be king of Israel one day. And we read about when David was able to defeat the giant Goliath with God on his side. In today's story, David is grown up and is now the king, just like God said. David lived in a beautiful palace, but he noticed something. He noticed something about God's covenant chest, which was a gold chest that held the 10 Commandments inside. He noticed that it was in a tent. David was speaking to the prophet Nathan and said he wanted to build a nice temple for the covenant instead of a tent. That night, God spoke to Nathan. And in the morning, he told David what God said. God has always traveled with his people in a tent. He does not want you to build a temple. God does not want you to build him a house, for it is God who will build a house for you. God promises that he will be with you and help you overcome your enemies. At first, David was really disappointed. He loved God and wanted to show his love by building a temple for God. But God had other plans. David realized this and was filled with gratitude. He prayed to God and gave thanks. He had wanted to do something wonderful for God, but God did something wonderful for him. David was so faithful to God that he almost got carried away. He had to stop and listen to what God was telling him. God is always working in and through us, helping us grow our faith and build up our own personal temple. It's important to remember that we sometimes have to stop and listen to what God's trying to tell us. And that might be no. God sometimes tells us no, but God's plan is always better. Please pray with me. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Bye.